West Africa viewers, and welcome to this Coffee with the Editor. I'm here at Clyde Industries head office at ZAC, and I'm going to be looking at a 1 in 12 48 kilogram turnout.
The holding company is Clyde Industrial Corporation. We've got 12 companies in our group, 2 that have traditionally focused on rail per-way material. One of them is a company that we actually bought in September 1987 called Railcore. That company at the time really had one purpose, and that was to go and buy second-hand per-way material from South African Railways at the time. And we basically used to lift it, and then we used to sort, and we used to classify, and we used to refurbish. Either refurbish turnouts and reclass the rails and then sell them off. We then also had another company that was started, and it really came out in operation when we were in Kimberley. We started a re-rolling mill in Kimberley many years ago, and that mill had one objective, which was actually to pick up these second-hand lines, 48 kg, and then to re-roll them into your thinner gauges, your 22s and your 30s, to sell into the mines. Like everything, the plans look great. It took a lot longer to get the mill running and operating than what we thought, and by the time we got it right, we'd run out of raw material. ISCO at the time approached us and said, rather don't try and make 30 kg rails from 48 kg rails, rather we will allow you to be a distributor for us. So ZAC Steel then became one of the distributors of basically mining, what we would call our mining rails, our 15 kgs, 22 kgs and 30 kg rails. And that then was ZAC. Both of these entities continued, and then we had both ZAC and Railcore operating from these premises. Just after COVID, where Transnet, with all the pilferage that had been happening, they put down a moratorium and said no more second-hand lines will actually be sold to anyone else except the foundries. So if they went out for tender, it was not going to go to anyone that was going to be refurbishing or reselling the rails, because they really couldn't get a handle on what was actually happening to the infrastructure besides it was being stolen. It can only go to basically your score metals, your smelting mills that basically use scrap as an input, then closed the whole opportunity that Railcore had existed on for many, many years. Kept the entity Railcore, but I took the staff and we moved the staff into ZAC Steel. Now ZAC Steel had primarily always focused on the mining industry and selling rails to the mining industry, and it also started to actually develop into the manufacturing through buyouts, the manufacturing of the fasteners for the mining industry. So we now manufacture the fasteners. We bought out 2 entities to do that. We had always been in the mining. I then brought Railcore in, and we started saying, okay, well, let's now start understanding the surface rail network and where we could go from that. We can no longer find second-hand material, and we can't refurbish. Then what came out was the Namibian second phase of its tender. When we looked at the tender, it was for the supply of rails of 48 kg R260 rails, and it was also for the supply of turnouts. And it was very specific in terms of the turnout that you had to supply. ArcelorMittal, being our biggest supplier of our mining rails, they went and bought the old Highveld steel. They had then rebranded into Amras, and they could produce a 48 kg R260. That all happened when all of a sudden the mill, when they bought it, they could actually roll the billets that were required, vacuum degas billets, and actually roll them and then supply them into Amras and then manufacture them. However, the mill, as it currently stands, the longest length it can roll is 18 meters. So it could produce a 48 kg, it could produce an R260 grade, but it was only 18 meters. The tender was very specific. It was basically for 25,000 tons of rail, 48 kgs, R260s, but it had to be 36 meter lengths. So we looked at the tender document and we said, okay, there was an opportunity in the tender document that in fact we could do an alternate bid. So I started working with ArcelorMittal and saying, okay, as long as we could put a fully compliant bid in we'll be able to bring you in to be able to supply as a non-compliant bidder your 18-meter lengths. And we would put all of that together, and we would then rail it from Amras through to Windhoek and or the laydown areas, and we'll be flat spot welding 18 meters into 36 meters. The big issue was we first had to get over the hurdle of basically being able to have a compliant bid. There's only 2 mills in Europe that manufacture 48 kg rails. The specific size that is actually used in Southern Africa, 48 kg, it was a South African railway profile. Only 2 mills basically had, 3 mills had the profile. We were having European mills that were going to bid. They were being bidders themselves. Because they had linked the tender with rails and turnouts, you had to be able to supply both. As bidders, they couldn't actually supply us. So we had to go and find another source. And unfortunately, with nothing else left, we all jumped on a plane and we went to China. We found a mill that was prepared to actually manufacture the rollers and supply the rail that was required, and was able to do the grade of R260 and was able to do 36 meters. So we could tick that off. Then came the problem with the actual turnout. The turnout, the way that the spec was written, it boxed you into a 51 kg blade. So in order to manufacture your blade on your turnout, you had to use a 51 kg rail. There was only one manufacturer of a 51 kg rail out of Austria. They were going to be a bidder. They were not prepared to actually supply us with the 51 kg rail. We then basically understood that another hurdle for us to manufacture the turnout was we had to find a mill that was going to be prepared to make a 51 kg rail. The big problem is it's not a big volume item, and it's only used for the blade as a stiffener of that part of the turnout. When you go to China or go anywhere else, they haven't done it with a 51 kg rail, which is just the web that's been thickened. They do it traditionally. They take the normal rail profile and they stiffen it with a plate, and they basically bolt the plate on, and that's how they stiffen and give the strength that is required. It was very specific. In Namibia, they wanted the 51 kg rail. We tried to lobby them beforehand to say, please try and allow the stiffener, because it would open us a far broader scope of people that would be able to bid. They weren't prepared to do that, again, because they said from a maintenance point of view and replacements down the line, all our turnouts in track are 51s. We needed to be 51s, so we knew we had to overcome that. So we also managed to find the mill that was going to be able to produce the 51 kg. The 51 kg, though, wasn't an R260 grade. It actually, because it was part of that turnout, we needed it to be an R350 LHT, just a hardened. So that really was also required. But we managed to do that, and we basically went in and we did the second tender. Unfortunately, the tender, we came third in terms of pricing. 2 Chinese consortiums actually beat us on it. But it had opened up our eyes to actually what was the market size for this turnout. And we then came back and we looked at what the market size was for this particular 48 1 in 12 turnout in South Africa. And let's rather look at the South African environment. Coming out of that, we said, okay, well, we've got a very big turnout manufacturing operation here in South Africa. We didn't want to focus on the 60 kg, that is turnouts that are used in mainline, your N1 lines. Our focus was to say, no, let's have a look at the market size for the N2 and the N3 lines, and for 48 kgs. And what we really established is about 55% of turnouts actually is the 48 1 in 12s, 1 in 9s, Secant. And we said, actually, let's go ahead and invest in this, because this might be something that we could actually develop. From that, it was all heads down with our technical team. For us and our staff, we've also had to move out of the mindset of reconditioning something. Our staff here have come from a reconditioning background. They would have seen a 48 kg turnout, a 1 in 12, 1 in 9, but it was reconditioned. So, we now fixing it up. Now, We have to stand, say we are doing something new that is going into track for the first time. We really battled with the actual frog and the insert. We couldn't find anyone locally that would be able to manufacture for us, and we do import that from China. The rails, we have just placed a 1,000-ton order for 51 kg rails. And if anyone wants to buy any 51 kg rails that don't want to use them for turnouts, we've got lots to sell. Because at the moment, 1,000 tons, which was the minimum quantity that I could get out of China, that they would be prepared to roll, that should last me, with the volume of turnouts, should last me about 10 years. The 51 kg is used a lot in the ports. Instead of a 48 kg, they use the whole thickened web throughout the port infrastructure. So we are hoping that when we now start repairing our ports, that the 51 kg rails would go there. But for now, we've got a lot of 51 kg rails. We had enough 51 kg rails, which we had bought, I think, about 10 years ago. So we had 51 kgs, enough to basically manufacture 4 turnouts. You are going to see the one that we have built, which is going into track with Transnet. The next plan is we are going to move on to putting together the other 3 until we wait for our 51 kg rails to arrive. We have already sold the 3, the one that will go into Transnet, and the other 3 have been already sold onto the mines. That is the whole story of how we have gotten to the stage. I do think that the turnout in the current environment really makes us a competitor in this space of the 48 kg.
So Kim, with open access and the changes coming through in terms of trim and the separation from Transnet Freight Rail Operating Company, I personally see a lot of the mines gearing up in terms of their rail infrastructure and connecting to Transnet's network. Are you seeing the same thing?
The one is going into track for testing, and the other 3 have been sold to, in fact, one of our mines that we have a supply contract for the mining rails. They are now really working on their network that actually joins into Transnet. It's one of we definitely see the synergies that are going to come. A lot of our customers are actually going to be our mining customers.
Back when I started at Railways Africa, the saying was there was more track underground than there was on surface. I'm assuming that still is true.
There's a lot of steel underground. The market per se is actually very much shrinking in terms of the 15, 22s and 30s, both surface and in mine rail. Our opportunities are to actually start going north. We don't really only want to focus on South Africa. Our idea is to move into Botswana, move into Namibia and to Zambia, and to expand that not only on rails, but other products that we are manufacturing around the whole Perway environment.
One of the things that our operators really struggle with is keeping that track in top condition. And the more the supply chain supports our African operators, the more we'll see value being unlocked in our economies.
I see our rail network as arteries to our economy. And if your arteries are blocked or they don't work, your economy will not work. And if we can't get our raw materials getting to port to export, this economy will not work. We have to get the arteries working, unblocked and working.